something we do every day, certainly not for jobs. But even in our Western culture, we don't do much bargaining or haggling. So maybe we go out to an antique show or a flea market and you see some lamp you can't live without. You ask the guy how much it is. He says $25 and you offer $15. He counters back with $22 and you say, I'll take it. Well, we're not going to go back and forth like that in our negotiating process because that's sort of a lose-lose proposition. He's getting less money than he wanted. You're paying more than you wanted. And, we may still end up at some of the same numbers, but we want to make it into a win-win proposition. And that's exactly what we're going to work on today. I want to improve your confidence in how to do that, help you be better prepared for it. So we need to determine what it is you're going to negotiate for. Now, we don't want to go in and say, I've got 20 items I need to negotiate for, but what are the 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 deal breakers? Got to have these at a certain level or it's just not going to work for me. So we need to narrow it down. And I've got a handy-dandy little chart that will help you prioritize what your key negotiating items are. We'll share that with you in a few minutes as well. Okay, the salary question. I'm sure lots of you have already gotten that. Recruiter calls up, hi, this is Dick Moore, the recruiter. Got your resume in my hand. What are you looking for? What are you making? Don't you hate those phone calls and the way they start? I often wonder whether recruiters can start conversations any different than that. What do they like on the weekend? Hi, I'm your neighbor. What are you looking for? What are you making? But we've got some strategies for answering that question and addressing that, maybe not even giving a number, but getting information back from them. So we'll take a look at that. And then, of course, the real biggie here is when you get that offer, how are you going to handle it? You're going to defer it, counter it, decline it, accept it, close it out in the proper way. We want to make sure we go through a whole bunch of strategies, action plans, and even sample scripts that you can then twist the words around into words that you like. Well, we've got a lot of great approaches to help you with that. And we'll do a little play out at the end here to see how much you've been learning throughout today's session here. I'm going to come back to slide 4. Make a note for yourself to come back to slide 4 after today. You need to come back and answer these questions. Do you have a negotiating strategy? For example, what if somebody makes you an offer for that job you really are high about, you really think it's a great fit, and the offer is, let's say, is $1,000 less than what you were looking for? What would you do or say in that situation? What if it was $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 less? What would you do or say differently? And what if it was a couple $1,000s more than what you expected? What would you do or say? So have you thought about this? Because I don't want you to end up behind the 8 ball when suddenly somebody makes you an offer. And that's another good reason for having a strategy and a plan. You never know when offers are going to be made. I've had candidates, and so my colleagues have candidates that walked in to a first interview. 2 hours later, they walk out with a job offer in their hand, and 2 days later, they come back with little tears in their eyes, wondering why they accepted this when they really didn't understand all the ins and outs of what was being offered to them. So I don't want that to happen to you. I want to make sure, folks, that you go in with a strategy, a plan, and that you're not going to get behind the 8 ball. So one of the first things we have to decide is, what is it are we selling? Well, I'm going to put some letters up right next to this, F, A, and B. Features, advantage, and benefits. What are your features, and what are the advantages and benefits that a company will gain from hiring somebody with those features? In other words, why are you fabulous? I guess it used to be called a soap years ago, but anyway, we're going to start with that clean slate. But why are you features, your advantages and benefits? Why are you fabulous? What is your value? We've got to be marketing our value to people. We need to market our value and not the cost. Because if you see a product, when you go to a store, if you see a product you're looking at and you think it's going to be of value to you, and it's got some special little features, first of all, you buy the product if it has value to, and if it has little special features that cost a little extra, you'll pay for that, right? Well, it's the same thing in job search. You're that product, okay, but you're also the salesperson, so you got to talk about all these little special features and how they are going to be valuable to that buyer, to that company, in other words. Okay, so we need to stop and take stock. What are we selling? Because in the interview and in the negotiation, we've got to be communicating that, so when people do make us an offer, it's going to be a really top-drawer offer because they see that value. Now, do you know what you want in the next position here? It's not just compensation. It's the whole environment of the whole situation, the kind of company, the role you're going to play, the opportunities for growth and professional development, the types of culture in that organization, even the geographic location. That's all part of the whole package. And we're negotiating not just for a dollar sign, but for that whole package as well. And have you thought about what's more important than something else? If I give you this, can you give up that? If you give up that, what about this? So I've got a handy-dandy little chart that'll help you prioritize your wants and needs as well ahead of time so we don't get caught short in the heat of that negotiating discussion. Now, do you have reliable data? Have you done your homework? Go to your closet, look at those old Scout uniforms that no longer fit, and say to yourself, that Scout motto of being prepared really still fits, even if the uniforms don't. So we need to be prepared. We need to do our homework here. So when you start negotiating, preparing negotiating, folks, you are already in the negotiating process right now. Even if you haven't started really interviewing, anything you have done, said about yourself, prepared to say about yourself since the day you left your last job is all negotiation. So you're already doing these things. When you left your job at Friday, the way you present yourself to people is how they're going to get impressed about you or not impressed, and all that's going to add up to this whole process of working through the final negotiation stages here. So you're already in that, and particularly when you're in interviews. Interviews are where you get a chance to talk about what? Your achievements, your accomplishments, and how much value, how much impact, what the results led to in that company, in that job. That's value. So as we talk about these things, particularly those interviews, that's where we're marketing that value. So we need to make sure we really do it successfully, and that's where we're going to prepare this library of source stories. Okay, I'll just highlight that if my computer will finally let me do it here. There we go. Highlight these source stories out here. Source stories, situation, obstacles, actions, and results. We have a great WebEx, folks. It's called Creating Powerful Accomplishment Statements. The accomplishment statements are the last two parts of these source stories, the A and the R, the activities, the actions you took, and the results you achieved. But the SOAR is the whole story. How many source stories do you think you need in your library to successfully work through landing that next job? How many source stories? Just shout them out, write them up on the chart, toss them out on the chat box. Okay, I got 15 to 20. I've got 20 as well. Okay, these are good starts. Anybody want to go higher than 20 source stories? Another 20. We seem to be stuck on that. Can we go higher than that? Lower? What do you think? 30. Enough yet? Anybody else want to go higher? Beat out Peggy, going once at 30, going twice? Well, actually, I'm going to say no sale. You didn't meet to the bottom level there, okay? You need probably 45, 50, or 60 of these source stories. And I know some of my colleagues say, hey, Dick, you're scaring people off with a number. But it's not that hard to get to that number. Think of it. If you've got 3 jobs listed on your resume, 3 different positions, and let's say you have 5 accomplishment statements under each one of those, that's 15 right there. And you need a source story, of course, for every accomplishment statement, right? So that gives you 15 just to begin with. And you better have a spare for each one of those. That takes you right up to 30. Because I'm going to say, wow, that was a great negotiation of a contract. Tell me about another negotiated. So suddenly we're up to 30, and you're going to meet with more than one person during the interview process, so you need a couple extra to keep everybody interested in you, right? So suddenly it's 3 times, that's 45, 4 stories. That's up to 60 right away here. Now, in any one conversation, an interview, or a negotiating session, maybe you only use 3, 4, or 5, like somebody's listed up here. But we need to have a whole library to draw from. Which ones you're going to emphasize, and you're going to emphasize the ones that will demonstrate the best of your value to that organization. Remember what folks are trying to do during this process, which impacts the negotiation. I'm trying to predict whether you're going to be successful in my company in this role. And all I have to go on is your past. And the source stories represent the power of your past, the impact you had, the power of the decision, the money you save, the increased size of the market share, the improved morale, the better customer relations, whatever it was. So that's why we need a lot of these stories. So if you're not sure about these, take the WebEx Creating Powerful Accomplishment Statements. And also in CRN, you've got a source story builder. When you go into CRN, under Quick Links tab, go into Quick Links, go down to where Resources Tools Library, Click on that, and the first tab up there is templates in the first section. And in that template section, you'll find a source story template. Go after that and start building your source stories. And you can build, here's a bunch of source stories about my decision making, here's another about my problem solving, here's some more about my leadership, my team building. So you can put 4 or 5 stories together in each of your major competency categories. Some of those will go on your resume, some will be there that you can use in your interviews and in your negotiations. Because in negotiations, you can bring them up. You can remind people of successes you've had, again, to help let them see the value they're going to get from hiring somebody like you. Now, we want this to be a win-win strategy. Now, obviously, if you get another $1,000 or so, an extra week's vacation or something special like that, you're a clear winner. But what about the company? They may be giving away a little bit more than they originally offered. How are they a winner? Well, they're a winner because when you come to work on that Monday morning, you're going to come in as a happy camper. You're going to feel good about yourself because you're able to negotiate a deal that made this a successful job search for you, and you're going to feel good about the company because they were able to meet you at least partway down the line. So the company wins because they get this happy camper that's coming right in on day one. So everybody wins in this kind of a situation, and that's what we want it to be, a win-win proposition. So we don't want to do anything silly or stupid that takes it out of that. All right, now, doing research. Got to do this. Again, the Scout Creed of being prepared. Professional associations are a great place to do research on salaries. You don't have to run out and join these. Just saddle up next to them. Let them know you're in career transition. That's a polite way of saying, hey, I can't afford your expensive dues. Okay? But they'll let you come to some of their monthly meetings. Maybe you have to pay for your dinner once or twice. But you can also volunteer to pass out registration name tags at the registration table. Members hate to do that because they want to get out around and schmooze, and this gives you a great opportunity to meet everybody who's coming to this meeting and see what company they're with and what name, and then you can remember who you want to talk to as the meeting progresses. They also conduct salary surveys. Now, they may not do them every year, but if the survey's out of date by a year, just plus it up probably around 3, 4, 5%, whatever would be appropriate for your industry, and that'll get you in the ballpark. They also have lots of publications, websites, newsletters, and trade journals, and many times in those magazines or journal articles, media articles, they'll have a little article once in a while on the latest trend in like quality control engineering salaries or whatever your particular professional area is. Plus, they have membership directories that will give you names of hundreds of people in their association that you can network with and call them up and say, hey, when your company hires people like me to do this kind of work in a company like yours, what's the typical compensation range? So professional associations have lots of really factors that will help you. Now, I did start mentioning networking, and you can never do enough of that, in my opinion, particularly since 75, 78% of jobs get landed through initial networking contacts. But your networking can be really great. When you're networking with somebody, just simply ask them, when your company hires people to do this kind of work at this level, what's the typical compensation package look like? What's the range you typically have? Now, you're not asking me to hire you. You're not asking to say, if I did hire you, what would I pay you? But just what's the average compensation? What's the range for people doing this kind of work in your company? And if your networking person doesn't know, they can go down to HR and find out about it and bring back and get that information as well. And people are quite willing to help. I had a candidate, probably half a year ago, that I was working with, and he got a great networking contact. Turns out the person was a vice president, and he was really pleased he even got time with this person. But he asked them that question, when you hire people like me in your kind of department in your company, what's the range for the compensation? And the VP looked him in the eye and said, I honestly don't know. He said, but I'll find out for you. Well, my candidate came back and told me, he said, I'll probably never hear from him. VPs are pretty busy. But believe it or not, that VP picked up the phone 2 days later and called my candidate and said, here's the range we use. So if you're polite and professional, people are willing to work with you. So jot these down. I've got several P words. Be prepared, be polite, be professional, and you can push for your cause. Be prepared, polite, professional, and you can push for what you want without damaging yourself. Okay? And again, you're not asking these people to hire you, just getting information. and network with lots of people, people in the company that you really want to work in, people in the competitive companies to that company, so you get an idea how their salaries all match up across several competitive companies. Now, I'm going to skip over recruiters for a minute and just go to postings here. Internal postings, they typically have a salary grade listed on it, and that salary grade, they may have the range with it, but if they don't, your networking contact who's looking at that posting can simply turn to the HR person and say, hey, what's the range for salary grade 6? And they'll be able to get that information for you. Now, what about recruiters? They're always, as I said earlier, they're asking you, what are you looking for? What are you making? Well, recruiters are a valuable source of salary information. Why is that? That's their business. They're in the job market 24/7. Who else should have a best idea of what people are paying folks like you in the job market? If the recruiter says, I really don't know what's going on in the market for people like you, then I'm not sure I want to work with that recruiter or put a lot of faith that they're going to help me out. Because you want to work with people that are knowledgeable of what's going on. And again, you're not asking the recruiter, what would you get me from a job offer, or what kind of compensation could you make sure I got? But you're just saying, when you place people like me doing this kind of work in these kind of companies, what's the typical range you're finding out? So you want to check out all these folks here when you're networking. Network with not only the company you're interested in, but those competitive companies as well. So do your research on that. Now, the other part of doing your research is getting out to the websites. There's a ton of information out there. Each of these websites works off of slightly different databases, so you want to check them all out. And then you want to get the average of the averages on that. Okay? Let's see. Julie's got an issue. What do you say to sleuth out salary information when you're changing careers? For example, going from CPA practice into a CFO role. Okay, that's fine. You need to check out whatever sources you have. Talk to people in that CFO role. Talk to different companies that you may already have contacts in. Particularly if you've been a CPA, probably you've been has some good contacts out there. Talk to people in these companies and ask them, as part of my research, what do CFOs generally get in an organization like yours? What's the compensation package? The range, as well as all these special things like incentives, bonuses, and stock options. So, yeah, you definitely, whether you call it sleuthing or networking, I don't care. You're going to go out there and hunt down, get that information. But check all these sites out. For our folks from Canada, Job Bank is a great site, folks. It gives you information not only broken out by province, but within the major regions within the provinces. All these are great sites, but check them all out here, and then tie that into your networking information as well. And then you can, get the average of all the averages out there and get a good feel for what you could expect for somebody with your background. Now, you will get that salary question. If you haven't, get ready, you will get it. Again, the recruiter's going to call up, got your resume, what are you looking for, what are you making? And what would you really like to say or do to them? You'd like to just stand up and say, I'm not going to tell you. Make me an offer and then let's talk money. Well, we can't quite be that direct or that rude on that. However, we can do the same thing if we are what? Prepared, polite, and professional. We can still tell them we're not going to tell them, but we can do it politely. For example, under here, you get the question, no matter which question it is, what are you looking for or what are you making? Just simply say something like this. Put these into your words. Based on, before we talk about salary, I'd like to know more about the position, the growth opportunities and responsibilities. That's a fair question to ask. Now, where we get ourselves in trouble with this type of question is we stop here and expect them to tell us something. And what they're going to say if you stop here, they're going to say, well and good, I'll tell you about that a little bit later, but I need to know the number before we can go ahead. Well, let's not even give them a chance to do that. So let's go out and take some deep breathing exercises. So before we discuss salary, and I'd like to know more about the job and its growth and responsibilities, what is the range for this position without coming up for air? Go right on to this next question. Okay, now, most of the time that's going to work. Not 100%, but pretty good. What's the range for this position? Once I come back and give you a range, then simply say something like this. Well, if this turns out to be the good fit I think it will be for both of us for this position, I'm sure we'll be able to work out something with that range. What would be the first 2 or 3 projects I'd be working on? And then again, after they give you those, without coming up for air, which of these are the most important? What are you doing? You're moving it away from their silly, stupid question that you didn't want to answer. You've asked them what the range is, and probably 90% of the time you're going to get that number. And then you're finding out about what are the key projects that they want you to work on. You're getting an idea how important and valuable that job is to them, and you're picking up points of where are they hurting. Okay, that's what we need to find out. Where are people hurting? And then in the interviews, we can talk about things that we've done that will help them resolve some of these kind of issues and problems. Okay, now that's not going to work 100% of the time, and you can change how you'd like to say this, whatever here. You could go right in if you didn't want to even talk at all about salary. Say, I'd like to know more about the growth and the responsibilities. What would be the first 2 or 3 projects I'd work on? You maybe even skip that, but you'd like to try to see if you can get some salary information. Now, at some point, somebody's going to put your feet to the fire and say, well, I need to get this number. I need to know what you were making or looking for. Okay, and either question again, based on, here's a good way to answer it, based on my research, okay, what I've seen in the marketplace, what I bring to this position, a range of this to this seems to be appropriate. And then you could counter back by saying, how does that match with your range? Let's get some feedback here. This is a discussion, folks. You need to be getting information to help you just while they're trying to get information to help them. Now, when you give a range, let's say your market research said 50 to 70. That would be too wide a range, in my opinion. I would say something I'm looking between 55 and 60, or 60 and 65. In other words, in that broader range, what do you think would be appropriate for someone with your background, okay, your level of experiences, your skills? Okay, so you give a small, narrow range. Now, if you're in 6-digit figures, then we give a little wider range. I'm looking for something between mid-120s to mid-130s, maybe a $10,000 kind of range in there. Make it just a little bit larger, because we're dealing with what? We're dealing with larger numbers in here. All right, any questions about this so far? Well, one question I know that's probably in the back of your minds is, what do I do with those horrible electronic application blanks? And they're horrible because they give you one little line that says, what are you looking for, what were you making, kind of thing. And you can only put in one number. Once in a while you'll find something a little bit more progressive that give you ranges, but you can't leave that line open. You can't put zeros in. You can't put ones in there. You can't say, I'd like to talk to you about it. You've got to do something or it just won't let you continue on in submitting that application. So here's my suggestion for that. Before you start filling in all these electronic applications, let's get our salary homework done ahead of time. Let's be prepared. Go out there and look at, what is all the ranges out there, what would be the average of all the ranges, in other words, the midpoint of these ranges. And my suggestion would be to put in that midpoint number. That's going to keep you in the ballpark. If you've done a good job of electronic of research here, when you get that electronic application, you can put in a number that's going to be around the midpoint of the range, and that's going to keep you in the ballpark, because they'll use these numbers otherwise to screen you in or out, most likely screen you out. If you come in too high, they can't afford you. If you're too low, there's something wrong with you. If it's not required, my guess, I probably wouldn't put the number in, okay? Or I'd put something around, if you really thought you had some really good homework on this. And one way to do good homework, by the way, is if you know the name of the company you're sending this application to, is before you send it in, network inside that company and find out what the salary range is for that job, and then put a number around their midpoint. And if you don't know anybody in the company, pick up the phone, call the HR department, and say, hey, I see you're looking for an accounting manager. What's your salary range for that? And if they play the game, I can't tell you, it's private, all this kind of stuff, I'd hang up the phone, then I would call back in again to the accounting manager or to the VP of finance or something and say, I understand you're looking for this position. What's the range you use for it? In other words, just don't give up. And then find some other poor networking soul that you can find inside this company that can check it out for you. They can go down and look at the internal posting. And the worst case to worst, do some networking with similar companies to find out what similar companies are paying for that similar position. Feasible, then I'd put it in. Okay? Otherwise, if it's not required, you can just leave it blank. Okay? So lots of different strategies for this, lots of different ways you can say this over here. Another way, if you're looking at a position, let's say you're going to go from industry into a nonprofit organization, Well, the salaries tend to be lower and sometimes significantly lower. But it's okay because that's the role you want to play in your life going forward, which is really great. But what you want to do is go in and, they're going to get nervous. If they're paying 40 and you were earning 60, they're going to wonder whether you're going to stay with them long enough or you're just taking this as sort of a stopgap until you get a better paying job. So one phrase you can use here when they question you about salary and the differences in salary is say, look, no two jobs are alike. My goal is to get into a position like this where I know I could be a key contributor, and I just want to fit into your salary you have for this position. So, I know no two jobs are exactly the same. My goal is to get in a position where I can be a key contributor and continue to grow professionally and make contributions, and I just want to fit into your salary structure. What is the range you have for this position? That's a fair way to address that. Okay? So that's our salary question. You are going to get it, but what I want you to do, folks, is after today, I want you to get out with some of your buddies and pals and play salary question. Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, wherever you want to go, sit around the table for an hour and everybody answer the question, have lots of laughs, but each time you try it out, hear how other people say it, you're going to learn a little bit about this, and you're going to get more comfortable in throwing the question back to that person that's asking it in that polite, professional, pushy way, because you'll be prepared. Okay? Got to practice these things. Got to practice them out loud. All right, let's move forward. What's negotiable, gang? Let's get some input here. Okay, you can write up on the board monetary, non-monetary items. What would you put on your list? Everybody put up at least one item on your list, from your list. Okay, and to do that, you don't have to, by the way, stick to all the dots here, but go to the upper left-hand corner. You see an icon that looks like a marking pen. Click once on that. Come down to the box with colors. Pick a dark color like the red that we just saw. Come up to the two-letter A's and click once on that. Bring your cursor in. Okay? And somebody's moving something around. I'd like to try to not have to mute all the lines yet, but if it gets too noisy, we will. But if you think you've been moving something around, we're hearing that. Vacation, vacation. I love it. That's always the first thing that comes in here. Okay, somebody wants a blue dot. That's interesting. Sometimes we get people wanting green dots as well here. Work from home. Somebody are moving around in the background, rebuilding your office or something. I hear some like metal crashing or something. If you think that's you, do a *6, please. Okay, vacation, bonus, stock options. I'm trying to find where that's coming from. Okay, sign-on bonus. We got that up here. Vacation, bonus, stock options, health care, benefits, flex hours, working from home, couple work from home. 3 of you want to work from home. You want to be from vacation or stay home, right? That's a good combination. Anything else, folks? Okay, I'm trying to figure out where that extra noise is coming from. I'll see if I can locate it, folks. Here, if I can, I'll mute that line. Okay, what else do we got up here? Sign-on bonus. And we got that up here. Okay, I left the word on. Expected weekly hours. Know those. Management involvement and support here. Let's see. The healthcare coverage. We've got that. Stock ownership here. Share of ownership. Equity positions. Right. Now we want 2 blue dots. We're going up. We'll go for 3, 4, or 5 in a minute here. Okay. And Nicole, I'm going to mute your line. I think that's where we're getting some of that static from here. So I'll just mute that for you here. Okay. Sometimes when we're just moving around a little bit, remember the Sprint ad, you can hear a pin drop, okay, in the background. Well, you certainly can. Cost to park, that's a good one, particularly if you're going to be in a parking garage or something like that. Cost to park here. These are great points here. Professional dues paid for. And not only do you want professional dues paid for, you want to make sure they're going to let you off on their time to go to these professional meetings. You don't want to have to take your vacation for that, right? All right, let's see. Let's get ourselves organized. Let's go over to our next slide here. Thanks, everybody. These are really great, and you didn't fail me by getting vacation in first. So let's organize these things. Let's pull out and put together a little spreadsheet for yourself. Each item that you have should go on a separate line. Now, I know we've got several down here towards the bottom that we've sort of scrunched 2 or 3 things together just to make sure that we got items out here as reminders for you. But you want to put well, and I'm going to mute another voiceover line. They're just creating little problems in the background here. Mandar, I've done that for you as well here, okay? So that'll quiet us down a little bit. And if either Mandar or Lee or Nicola or any of you that I've muted, if you have a question you want to raise, just let me know in the chat box and I'll unmute your line for you, okay? So here's what I want you to do. No apologies necessary. This is just what happens, okay? Okay, so what I want you to do, take a look at your list, build your list, put each item on a separate line. Okay, don't scrunch them together. Then I want you to do two things. I want you to look at each item independent of any other and rate it. How important is it? 1 to 10. 10 meaning most important. Well, we know salary is going to be a 10. Vacation we know is up there at 9 or 10, the way it came in first. But maybe start date's only a 2 or 3. You don't care whether you start this week or next week. Relocation depends if you're moving. It could be a 0 or it could be a 10. But rank them in terms of how important each item is to you. Then once you've done that, come back and look at all those 9s and 10s and rate them relative to each other. You know, if I could get telecommute, flex 12, 15, 16 weeks, something, what would be a good balance point for you? Because you don't want to start a new job, particularly if you're relocating, and find out the job gets eliminated through a merger or an acquisition or just a reorg, and that you're out in the streets in a new town, all your goods are still in a warehouse, your family's still in the hotel, and you know, you're out of work. I had that happen to a very senior candidate, and he had no severance protection at all. He ended up, I think, with 4 weeks of severance. Okay, and his old company wouldn't take him back because they were mad he left. So you need to protect yourself in here. So that's it's a no-brainer for the company because 99% of the time it's never going to take place, and if it does take place, they're going to bill the cost of that severance to you, which is very small compared to the cost of any other reorg they're going through. They're going to build it into the cost of that process, that organization change. And you'll get lost in the rounding errors. Let's go back and look at some of these other items. Salary and bonuses, we'll come back to that a little later on. Same on vacation here. Under benefits, health care. Question you need to find out. When does your health care coverage start? Day 1, or do you have to wait 30, 60, 90 days? Not everybody starts you in health care coverage on day 1. And you may have forgotten about that. So you want to ask for that, because what you're going to be doing during those 90 days you're not covered, you're going to be paying your COBRA payments, right? Those aren't too cheap. So why not go to them? If they say, well, we can't start your coverage for 90 days, say, fine, this is what I'm paying. I'm paying $950 a month for COBRA for those 3 months. Can I get a sign-on bonus equivalent to 3 months to cover those costs? Companies are more willing to do this than you might think, because they don't want you to be feeling under financial pressure while you're trying to learn and start a new job. So if you don't ask for something, it's an automatic no. If you ask politely and professionally, yes, you're pushing for your cause, and if you're prepared, you know what to talk about. And what's the worst case they can do is still say no, but at least you've asked for it. And probably more often than not, you will be able to get something to help compensate for that. What's covered under health care? Dental, vision care, just make sure you know. If we're care 401ks, and the Canadian version is the RRSP, we can't negotiate those with people. Those are plans that are regulated, laid out. Otherwise, I'd end up with 495 different health care plans. 401ks and so on are government regulated, all sorts of rules and procedures that can't be broken. Companies can get into enormous trouble and even lose their programs if they don't do them properly. So while we can't change the terms of these things for any one candidate, you do need to know what the impact of that is. So just like on health care, if your copay is going to be $200 a month now and before it was $100 a month, well, I'd want to get that extra $1,200 a year put into my base salary, because I'm going to be losing otherwise. My net income is going to be a little bit lower. Okay? And Trench, I'm going to come back to your question here in just 1 second here. 401k, what's the matching option? Well, first of all, if you can't get in and start the plan for a year, many times that's what plans have. You have to be there a year before you can join them. So during that time, you're not going to get any matching monies. So let's say you were getting 2 or 3% match at your previous company. Well, I'd want to go after some or all of that into a sign-on bonus, because that's just money I'm not going to be getting towards my retirement during that 1-year period here. Also, what's the difference in matching levels? If you could match before at 6% and the new company only matches max at 4%, and you were giving the max level, I mean, you have to be fair with letting people know what you were doing in the past plans, then I'd want to get that 2% difference again into my base salary. I'm just not going to get forever and ever in here. Okay, so a couple questions coming in. Who do you negotiate? A hiring manager or HR? It's going to depend a little bit on who makes the offer, and sometimes you'll end up negotiating with either one, or you could negotiate with both of them, bring them both into the room and talk to them about the job. But basically, if the HR person calls you up, we'll talk about how you respond to the offer itself in a few more minutes here, and then you can negotiate with them, or you could ask if you feel you'd rather negotiate with a hiring manager. You could ask to do that, but you'll have to sort of follow whatever their plan is, because sometimes HR people would rather that they do it instead of the hiring manager, because the hiring manager might be more willing to give away the store a little bit just to close that job opening, okay? Are we to prioritize how many items we negotiate? Well, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about filling in this chart here and find out where the deal breakers are. So let me come back to that in just one point here. And let's see, somebody's, for example, if you get offered 20 less and a health care, it doesn't start for 90 days. Do I ask for a sign-on bonus to bridge to the health gap only? Well, it's really two different items. If the salary is $20K less, we want to negotiate for that first of all, and then after we get salary, we want to negotiate for salary first. Then we'll look at all the other things, because everything in the future is going to be a percent of that base salary. So then after that, then we'll get the salary thing settled, then we'll come in and talk about health care and other things as well. Okay, let's see, Mandy's got a question here. When the internal HR extends the offer on the phone, should we wait 24 hours to think about it? Yeah, we're going to do that. You guys and gals are getting slightly ahead of me here, okay? We'll be there in just a second and a negotiating strategy and timing and so on. Let's just finish up with this chart so you will be prepared for this. So for each one of the items on your chart, you're going to fill in the blanks here in detail. It's not just, yes, I had health care, but here's what I was covered, here's when it started and so on. I had dental care, vision care, whatever. Okay, you're going to fill in all the information you have here and all the category items you have on your list. Then what's your expectation, reality-wise, based on your homework, your preparation, what's realistically the numbers that you'd be looking at here, or things that you'd be looking for. And then when you're going to set up multiple columns for each of the companies you're interviewing with, because you'll be able to pick up a lot of this information along the way. HR people love to talk about their benefits, and you can pick up other things about relocation policies and educational reimbursements and so on during those conversations initially with HR or over the course of your contact with them. But then when you get that final offer, you're going to fill in all the blanks here for all the items you have here, and then you're in a position to go back and say, okay, here's what I was getting, here's what I was expecting to get, and here's what they offered. We can go back and forth and locate those 3 or 4 key gap areas where there's got to get those gaps closed, or it's just not going to be workable for me. So that gets back to the question of how many items. Well, we're not going to negotiate for 15 or 20 items in here. You're going to negotiate for those 3 or 4 that are really critical and clarify a lot of the others. You know, something like car allowances, how does that work? Health benefits, a lot of that's not going to be negotiable, but we need to clarify it. And then if there are major gaps, then we need to balance that out with signing bonuses or actual numbers in your salary. Okay, so this will let you determine know what some of your minimum levels here are, what are your high priorities, how do these things rate relative to each other, and so then you'll be able to identify those key gap areas that you really want to close those gaps, but it's probably not going to work well for you. Now, let's talk about one other item before we get into negotiating plans and strategies. Okay, everybody really truly wants to compensate you fairly. Now, I know there could be some company out there that's going to try to take advantage of you. They realize you've been out of work for 2 or 3 months. You look a little desperate, in the interview, a little too quick to respond to something here and there. So there might be somebody that tries to take advantage of you. But I think that is really more rare than people might think, because it's not really good for the company either. Because what's going to happen? If I lowball you a couple $1,000 or $3,000 or something just to take advantage of your feeling of being desperate for a new job, what's going to happen? In 3 or 4 months, you're going to be packing your bags and going to a company that pays you fairly. And that's what you would do. I would do it, you would do it, because you want to get that fair compensation. So you took this as a stopgap. So companies really don't want you to have to pack up and leave. They really want you to stay. They want you, they need you, you want to be successful, and everybody wants to get off on the right foot. Now, once in a while, there could be a recruiter that tries to sell you a little short. Some of the contingency recruiters might do that. Let's say you're looking for 55, and they know the company is not too keen on going that high, but they know the company would offer 50 without any problems. So they'll come in and say, look, I know you want 55, but I also know you want to be in this company. So if they offer you 50, I'd take it. And then they go back to the company and say, I know Dick was really looking for 55, but you know, if you offer him 50, he's going to take that. So they sort of wheel and deal a little bit behind the scenes, whether you know it or not. You can't always control that. And what are they looking after? They're looking after themselves, because they get a commission based on your first year's salary. And getting you a commission on 50 is a lot better than getting you a commission on 0, because you decline the job or you blew the negotiations. So they may try to sell you a little short. But most recruiters aren't going to do that, because they'll get a reputation for doing that, and then people won't work with them. So my best guess would be that companies are going to really try to market you fairly in terms of what they see in the market value for these positions. Now, you need to understand how company compensation plans work. Some companies like to be right on that salary curve. If the average is 50, that's what they're going to be offering, right around that. Some companies like to be salary leaders, $2,000 or $3,000 ahead of the game, and there are actual companies out there that like to be salary followers. Yeah, I never quite understood all the logic behind that, but they like to be that. So you need to be asking questions of how their salary plans work, their compensation plan, what's their salary philosophy, and so on. And then you get a good idea of what kind of things they're going to be offering you when you do get that offer. Now, when you get the offer, you want to think about it for a couple of days. 48 hours is a good time period. 24 is a little short, in my opinion. You don't want to be saying, can I think about it for a week or 2 weeks? Because the company knows that you're going to be going out looking for better offers. But they're certainly willing to give you a couple of days. And we can even stretch that out in other ways as we go forward here. So you want to defer your answer. Now, counter. I don't like that word, personally. It shouldn't be, we're going to put on suits of armor and go to battle. We're going to have a nice discussion. So let's think of this as having a discussion. Two people trying to come to a mutual agreement over something that's going to be beneficial for both of them. At the end of that discussion, it's either going to be right on and you can accept it, or it's going to be way off and you're going to decline it here. Okay? And if an employer question comes in here, Jordan's asking, what if an employer says, I can only give you 24 hours doing the fast hiring requirements? Well, let's start with the 24 hours. I still think there's ways you can build in some extra time, as we'll see as we go forward in this operation here, okay? We'll talk about negotiating strategies and scripts here. So, okay, after the offer is made. Now, again, if companies are rushing you on things, then, I would sort of question, it's a paradox. Companies take forever to get around to making your decision, and I make you an offer today, and I want you to start tomorrow. Well, that's not really fair to you. And I think most companies realize that. If they're really putting a lot of pressure on you, then you have to say, hey, that's part of the culture. Is that the kind of culture I want to work in? And if it is, that's okay, but you still need some time to negotiate. But one of the advantages of going through our session today is you can start putting together your negotiating plan. So even if somebody pushes you in that 24-hour kind of time limit, you've got a plan of attack here where you can work on this, and you're not going to get caught up behind the 8 ball and be scared into making a decision that you're going to regret later on. So after the offer is made, make you the offer. Before you even open up your mouth and say anything, pause for a few seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It'll seem like forever, but pause. There's some power in that, as I'll say. But also, what did your mother tell you when you were growing up? Think before you speak. Don't open your mouth up without thinking about it. Well, dear old mom was right on. She's a good negotiator because she was right on. You don't want to say something and just blurt it out because you will more than likely get yourself into trouble by doing that. Now, when you do respond, let's respond with enthusiasm. Okay, so the numbers are pretty cheap, on the low side, and you want to throw something at me, you want to walk out, you want to stomp your feet, whatever. Don't do that. Stop and think about it. Getting a job offer, regardless of what the numbers are. Just getting an offer is something to get excited about. I mean, how many times every week do you get a job offer? Not very often. So that is worth getting excited about. And you never know what's going to happen with the numbers. Job miracles do happen, and you can make them happen. I had a candidate. Let me give you a true story. A candidate about a year and a half ago now. He got an offer. It was quite low, and came back and told me about it. And he said, I'm going to think about this, and I'll get back with you. Well, I didn't see him for a week. And when he came back, he said, well, I accepted the position. And I looked at him, and I was ready to beat him up, shake his head, see if it rattled. And I said, I thought you said it was too low. He said, it was, but I got promoted twice during the negotiating process. And here's what happened. He went back to them and said, look, I'm really excited about joining your company. I know, as we've talked about, I can do a lot of things. He reminded them of some of his source stories, some of the successes he's had in similar roles, and said, could we go back? The offer's on the low side. Could we go back and revamp the job description a little bit and move it up a salary grade or so? And they did. They went back and added a couple of things in, moved it up to the next salary grade. So that's promotion number one. Well, he looked at it. The numbers still weren't where he needed them, and he still felt he could do more for the job. So he got a little bit more aggressive on it this way, but politely. He came back and said, well, look, let's put our heads together. Let's get creative together, because I think I can still do more that would be beneficial to your company. And that way we can move this offer up to a level perhaps it would be more beneficial to me as well. And so they put their heads together. They revamped the job description another time, moved it up a couple salary grades, and was right exactly where he wanted it, and he'd helped design that job around him. So it was really a win-win situation. The company was getting more from him, even though he was getting more from them as well. So everybody won in that situation. So if he had walked away from that, he never would have had that opportunity. So don't walk away from things. One of my big pet themes is, in any part of job search, is play the game out to the very end. Negotiate, 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 and at the end of the day, if the numbers aren't right, then you raise your hand and say, sorry, Charlie, it's not right for me. Okay, but don't quit early on, because things do happen. Okay, because I'll explain why you have a lot of power to make these things happen. Make sure you clarify the details of the offer. Thank them for the offer. You don't have to jump up and down and give them hugs and kisses, but be very polite. Thank you for the offer. I'm highly interested or excited about the position, and I'd like some time to review it. Now, what I want you to do is you suggest to me when you'd like to get back. Because if you say to me, well, Dick, I'd like some time to review it, when would you like to hear from me? Well, I say, well, it's late in the afternoon. Why don't you call me by tomorrow noon? Well, that doesn't give you enough time to really think this thing out thoroughly, to step away from the excitement of the offer and put your head back on together and make sure you've got all your I's dotted and T's crossed. So what I want you to do is put together a little matrix for yourself, a little 3x5 card. It's really simple. If I get an offer on Monday, Tuesday afternoon is way too short a time period. You want a day and a half of business working hours so you can talk to people and check out numbers and get more information to think about it. So if I got an offer on Monday, I would suggest either Wednesday afternoon or maybe Thursday morning. A couple of days out there, day and a half to 2 days. If I get one on Tuesday, okay, what would I suggest? I'm going to suggest Thursday or Friday morning. If I get one on Wednesday, I'm going to suggest Friday or Monday morning. So lay out a little matrix card for yourself. Go through the exercise to do that. That's going to pound it in your head. So when you get that offer and you're all excited about it, you remember, yeah, I put that card together for Dick, and this is what I said. It's Wednesday, so I'm going to suggest maybe we get back together Friday, or, it wouldn't be bad if we waited till Monday morning to get that back together. That gives you some time to put your act together, get all your I's dotted, T's crossed, and everything lined up for yourself. Okay, so you got to remember to do that, but lay out a little matrix ahead of time. Now, this next one, I'm pleased to be your candidate of choice. I'm going to come back and talk about that on the next slide, but that's important. Or I'm pleased that I'm really excited that out of all the 100 candidates that applied for this job, that I was the one you felt was the best fit. I know that as a manager. That's why I'm making you this offer. But it doesn't hurt to remind me. You can hit me over the head with a baseball bat, a Nerf bat, okay, just to remind me that I picked you, and what did I do? I threw away the other people, right? That gives you some power. We'll see how in a minute. Now, the next part of this, if you're available Thursday, I can come to your office. Well, we want to, if it's geographically possible, let's negotiate face-to-face. That's the best way to do it, because we can have a conversation. We can discuss it. We can talk about it. We can raise questions right on site with each other and get answers to them right on site with each other. Now, if it's not geographically possible to do that, then companies aren't going to fly you all around the world anymore like they used to, but let's pick up that thing called a phone and let's talk voice to voice. Do not try to negotiate by text message or email. If you do, I personally will hunt you down. It's the most dangerous thing you can do. You've got to talk voice to voice. And those phones that we text on and email on, they actually let you dial people and talk to them. Let's do that. Okay? And why is it so dangerous the other way? Now, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to call you up on the phone. I'm going to make you an offer. And at the end of the phone call, I said, I'll send you an email confirming that. So you're going to get an email from me. So if you sit here for the next 2 days and put together World Book of Guinness record special email, the best one ever written in the entire world, record setting. Okay, all your thoughts, your ideas, your questions, your concerns are built into your email answer. Perfect. Okay, when I open it up, what do I get? I get just what you're seeing here on my screen, a bunch of black and white words. And I don't know how intensely you meant this or how important that is to you, and I don't have a chance to discuss it with you. So if I put together the world's best response to your world's best email, you're just getting my black and white words, and we're going nowhere. And we're going to make mistakes. I sent an email to somebody a couple of days ago. They were getting me some information. They only could get part of it. And I was pleased to get that. I was running out the door, and I just sent back, great. Well, the next day when I talked to the person, they said, were you mad or happy? And I said, I was ecstatic about this because it really helped. And they said, I wasn't sure. And I said, how come? I wasn't sure if you meant great, you got me a lot of valuable information, or great, you didn't get me the rest of it. So don't leave these up to misinterpretation. Talk to people. You've got to talk to people on this. Now, let's get off that soapbox and we'll get on another one here. Candidate of choice. This is important. Candidate of choice. Let's see what happens in the negotiating process. Before we even get into negotiations, we're getting into the decision process. I've got a level playing surface here, the qualifications I'm looking for that job. I've got 3 final candidates, okay? 3 final candidates. And now, they're all pretty good. In fact, when I get down to the final 2 or 3, any one of them could be successful in that job. Okay, because they're all close enough. That's why they're the 3 finalists. And it's just sort of, which ones do I like better, a little tweak here, a little tweak there. Little things make big differences at this point. But let's say I think you are the best candidate. So I pick you up off this level playing surface here. If I can do that, there we go. And over here to the right, I've got a little column in my office here, a little pedestal, and I put you on top of this pedestal. And once I've got you up here, I've rationalized. I said, you are my candidate of choice. Any little flaw you have just flies out this open window. I might say, well, you could have used a little bit more of that, but, if I have you sit down with Charlie for a couple of days, he'll get you right on board with that. I can spend a half a day with you on this topic, and we'll get you right up to speed. So any little issue that I might have had with you just totally disappears. And now that I've made this decision, I go to my boss and tell them who I've decided, who's my candidate of choice. I go to HR and tell them. I go to other department heads that you're going to be interacting with, tell them. I even go to my staff and tell them who I picked. Now, what do I do at the same time, though? I picked you off that level playing surface. I take these 2 people off that same level playing surface, and where do I put them? Well, they go at the bottom of the pedestal here. Okay, remember earlier they were almost all equal, but now I'm going back and I'm highlighting some of the things I didn't like about each one of them. Where your little flaws flew out the window, their flaws get a little bit bigger. My boss says, why didn't you hire Sam? Well, Sam was pretty weak here, and I just wasn't going to have enough time to get Sam up to speed. We got this project coming up, and I just can't dilly-dally around with that. And what about Sue? Well, Sue was missing a little bit here or there, and I would have to have a couple people work with her for almost a month to get her caught up. Whether that's true or not, these are the things I feel about it. So what I've been doing, I'm rationalizing why I selected you and why I rejected the other people. And what does that rationalization mean? It means that I have put distance between you, who I've accepted, and those who I rejected. Folks, psychologists call this psychological dissonance. Just think of it as distance. We do this every day of our life. When you think of the last time you walked in the store and you wanted to buy something, there were 2 almost similar. Why'd you pick the one you picked, and why'd you reject the other one? Even it's simple. You go into the grocery store, aisle 5, can of green beans. Why'd you buy the Del Monte name brand? Better quality, even though a little bit more expensive. Why did you buy the store brand? Good quality, saved a dime a can. You've got reasons for all this. When you bought that spring jacket, why'd you pick the blue one? Made me look younger, thinner. This year's in colors matches my eyes, goes with more outfits. Why didn't you buy the red one or the green one? Make me look old, fat, ugly, last year's colors. We do this all the time. Why do you and your family always drive that one brand of car? All the cars are going to get you from A to B. They all have four wheels, a motor, and a steering wheel, right? But you've rationalized why one's better than the other, and I do the same thing in job search. So this gives you power, because think of it, folks. If I blow this over a couple $1,000 or a week's vacation, what am I left with? Rejects. Anybody on the call want to hire a reject? Because I publicly committed to the fact that you are my acceptable candidate of choice, and I've also publicly indicated the other people weren't. So I don't want to blow this deal because it makes me look bad in the process here. So for the few $1,000s that we're probably talking about here, or the next week's vacation, this gives you tons of power in the situation until you do silly, stupid things that blows your cover, in other words. So let's not do that. Let's be prepared. Remember? Be prepared. So you're going to prioritize your needs. So you know what it is that you're looking for. You know where you stand in terms of the offer relative to what you were hoping to find in that new offer. And then think of how you're going to ask questions. These are some great questions to start with. Would it be possible to do this? What if we were to do this? Could we do that instead? Does the company have any flexibilities? Okay, now, I can say no as a company to any one of these, but you haven't hurt yourself. You're being very polite and professional. Now, let me give you a story of somebody who didn't follow these rules. This is a true story. A lovely lady several years back. She was a systems analyst in a small insurance company that had been floundering for a couple of years, and her salary had literally fallen behind the average curve. And I believe the numbers were 46 around that she was making. And she looked at the salary surveys, and it looked like something low to mid-50s would be more appropriate in a well-heeled insurance company. And that's exactly who she was negotiating with. She had lots of contacts. She'd been interviewing for several weeks. She had internal networking contacts that were pushing her cause and also telling her what was going on, what the company liked about her, and so on. So she knew when she came into the company this next day that she was going to get a job offer that morning. So she walks in the door and says, "Good morning, everybody. I'm really excited about the possibility of joining your company. Just want to let you know that I need something close to 54 to make it work." That's how she started her conversation. Must have 54 to make this work. Well, what did the company do? They called a 5-minute huddle, came out of the huddle and said, "Well, we want to thank you for coming in, but we've decided not to offer you a position. Goodbye, good luck, close the door on the way out." Well, she didn't have good luck. It took her 3 months to find another small floundering company that paid her back to that 46 level. Now, I found out, number one, it wasn't the money. They were willing to go to 55 or 56. That wasn't the issue. It was her attitude. The manager said, "I've never knowingly hired anybody who's going to draw a line in the sand and dare me to cross over it." And that's exactly what she said. I just want to let you know I need to have 54 or it's not going to work. So don't do something silly like that. She could have gotten 54, 55, or 56. Instead, she ends up with a lousy job in a lousy company back right where she started. So I don't want you to do silly things. We want this to be a win-win strategy for everybody. So here's some conversations you can work on and put into your words. So let me know I'm excited, you're excited about the position and the possibility of working with you. And then don't stop here. We've got to take those deep breathing exercises. I know this would be an excellent fit for both of us. For both of us, that's critical. It's an excellent fit for you, and it's an excellent fit for them. Remind me of that. Even though I know you were my candidate choice, it doesn't hurt to remind me in polite ways. And then, again, don't stop. Take those deep breathing exercises and tell them why it's a good fit. You're looking for somebody they're looking for, which is a polite say, you need people. And that's why they're filling these spots. They're needing people. You're looking for somebody to do this, design and launch successful programs. Hey, that's me. That's my specialty, which is why I was looking for a number closer to this based on what I've seen in the marketplace. 3 elements: what they're looking for, what you bring to the table, and what it says in the marketplace. And remember, they're looking for people because they have needs, issues, problems, pain points that have to get resolved, and you're that solution provider. That's why it's an excellent fit for both of us. So let them know you've done these things. Okay, then you go on, which is why I'm close to accepting the offer with some modifications. So we're polite, professional, moving it forward. Now, this first point up at the top here, make sure you understand how their compensation plan works. Particularly, what's the range for the position? Can they hire above the midpoint of the range? Because if they can't, if that's a hardcore policy, you don't want to bang your head against this midpoint wall. But look at it. There's ways, if we're clever, we can climb over it, or maybe we can crawl underneath it and still get above it. Maybe not on day one, but a few months later. If you get an offer at the bottom part of the range, probably shouldn't be there for most of you if you're particularly taking a similar position that you've had before, because you're bringing a lot of background and experience. You should certainly be at the midpoint and a little higher than that if they can hire above that. What if you get an offer at the upper part of the range? That's great, good numbers, but what happens 12 months from now? Can I get another increase? Some companies have policies that says I can't give you an increase that would take you out of the top of the range. Well, that may still be okay with you, but I personally wouldn't want a surprise after 12 months of working hard and find out I can't get any money. It may be perfectly fine because I'm getting lots of good bucks I never expected to get up front here. But make sure you understand how the system works here. When do your salaries get reviewed? Once a year based on anniversary date, or based on once a year on a certain date for everybody? If I give you outstanding performance, what's the typical range of a salary increase? Is it 10 to 12%, 6 to 8? Okay, and don't be dumb enough to ask me the question, what if I only give you average? Because we're going to talk about outstanding performance. I give you excellent, outstanding performance. What's the typical size of a merit increase? Understand how these things work. You can get a lot of this information advanced from the HR person even before offers are made. And it shows that you are being professional in your approach, looking out not just for the job itself, but looking out for yourself in a nice, balanced way. Now, the next three items are about money, money, and money. And that's what we want to focus on first. We want to maximize the money in our base salary, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, because everything in the future is going to be a percent of that. Okay? So if you get an offer here, let's start with the first statement up here. You get an offer, maybe they've made a little bit movement already, and this is a nice, polite way to say things, okay? I really appreciate the movement, certainly going in the right direction. Well, what are you saying here? You're saying, hey, cheapskate, you got to go back out and get me some more cash. But you're being polite and professional. But don't stop here. Explain why. It seems a little modest or conservative. Those are good words. Modest or conservative based on what? My research, what they're looking for or need. I like to replace that with need, and what I bring. Those same three items we looked at in another slide a minute ago. And then ask a nice open-ended question. Would the company have further flexibility to get close to this number, to be more in line with what I've seen in the marketplace? Okay, that's a nice, polite way. Okay, modest based on my research in relationship to what they're looking for, what I bring. Now, whether you get movement in here or not, either way, I would still go on to the next one, even if you get a little movement here. I've had candidates, by the way, that have got all three of these things that we're going to talk about now. But this next one will also put money in your base salary, but not immediately. You have to wait 3 to 6 months for this. Since we're very close, could we close the gap by considering a salary review in 6 months? Okay, so we can't get over the midpoint, but we can climb over the top here, right? So can we consider salary review in 6 months? Don't forget the last part, in addition to 12 months. And don't forget that you're asking for a salary review, not a performance review. Performance review comes with a salary review, but salary doesn't come with a performance review always. Make sure you're clear on that. Now, companies are more willing to do this than you might think. Years ago, companies used to hire you in as like a temporary employee. 3 to 6 months later, the band would come marching through your office. You'd be anointed as a full-time employee and you'd get a raise. Well, the legal beagle lawyers didn't like that because it implied you had an implicit contract for life. So companies got away from that or are a little bit more careful about it. But that vestige thinking is still there. And many companies are still thinking about giving you a little review after 3 to 6 months anyway as a surprise. Well, I like surprises as much as anybody else on the call, but I don't want to wait to find out whether that's a good or bad surprise 6 to 12 months from now. I want to find out what's going to happen as we move forward here. Okay, so that's important, folks, that you ask for these right up front here. And again, you're being polite and professional. If they say no, then that's okay. You may not, you'll go back and decide whether the numbers are okay, but we haven't damaged yourself. Now, the next one doesn't get you money in the base salary, but does get you some money to help close that gap during the first year. Thank you for considering my counteroffer. If I accept that number, would you consider a signing bonus to offset that difference in salary? Excuse me. Okay, a little sign-on bonus. Now, I've had candidates, my colleagues have as well, that have gotten all three of these, even when the original offer was maybe very good or slightly better than what was expected. Market research, depending which surveys you look at, indicate that between 55 and maybe as high as 65% of companies are planning on negotiating and or are willing to negotiate. And another 10% in some of the surveys indicate that for the right candidate, quote, candidate of choice, unquote, they would be willing to negotiate as well, even though they didn't want to. So the odds are a little bit in your favor. Now, I know there's some of you say, well, I'm always under that black cloud and nothing like that ever happens. Well, you know, if you're polite and professional, maybe we can make it happen. But also if you're polite and professional, and if they can't do anything, if they're saying no, no, and no, and you still want the job, you haven't damaged yourself. You haven't drawn the line in the sand and said, I got to have it or else. Okay, because if you put that or else in there, then, you know, if they don't give it to you, you're stuck. You got to walk away from it. Or you really look really dumb in accepting something you said you wouldn't do. Don't get yourself into those kind of boxes. Now, what about vacation and other special things? Let's get money settled first. Don't start flipping out vacation for dollars. Get the dollars first, and then let's bring up vacation or other special things you have. Now, vacation, I know, can be a little bit of a sore point because maybe you've had 4 or 5 weeks and they're only offering 2 weeks. But you can bring it up in a nice, polite way. You can ask them if they would have any flexibility with the vacation offer, and then indicate why. You know, in my previous company, I was getting 4 weeks of vacation. Having only 2 for the next 5 years with your company is going to put a real crimp in my work lifestyle for myself and my family. We're used to doing things on a regular basis, and we're going to have to cut out some of our standard vacation plans that we have. And that's not, you know, that's going to affect the life-work balance of my family as well. Would you have any flexibility in here? And companies are trying to be flexible with respect to that. They may let you take a week's vacation without pay, so in essence you're buying a week, or maybe they'll let you take it at half pay on that. So there's ways around that, and maybe they can give you credit for service in the industry, not in their company. That's another option. You know, I've been in this position for 10 years. Can we apply some of that time towards your seniority aspect of your vacation policy? And maybe companies will do that. I had a candidate who wanted from April to October, he wanted Tuesday afternoons off. Why did he want that? Well, he played golf. So he didn't start out asking for that right away, although it was a critical item. He probably would have turned the job down if he hadn't gotten it, because he'd been doing this for 10 years. But he got everything else settled first, and then he said there's one last thing. He explained what it was, how he worked it out. He would go in and go to meetings that were important and so on. They looked him in the eye and said, not a problem. I had another candidate that realized he was going to pick up $2,300 additional commuting costs. He was going to be working out of Connecticut and taking the train in every day to New York City. So he had parking fees at the home end. He had train fare fees, which is not cheap out of Connecticut to New York. He had either cab or subway fares from that, and all sorts of things that added up to that $2,300. So he didn't ask for that right away. He waited until everything else was signed, sealed, and delivered. And he said, one last thing that's very critical. He unrolled his spreadsheet, showed them the numbers. They looked him in the eye, said, not a problem. Can you fathom what would have happened if either one of those people had said on day one, hey, I'm excited about the job, but I need Tuesday afternoons off, or I'm going to need $2,500 in my base salary to offset commuting costs? They would have laughed him out the door. Said that's why you can have every Tuesday off all day, or that's why we never hire people who don't live in the city. But get them first of all to fall in love with you. Make that offer. Be that candidate of choice. And then let's work on the base salary, and then let's go for these special things. Because at this point, as I said earlier, they don't want to blow this deal over a week's vacation. Because then they're stuck with rejects, or they've got to start the whole process all over. So you have power in this situation. Now, when you accept the offer, make sure once you've accepted it, the game's over. Okay, you can't come back to me on Monday and say, well, I know I said yes to it, but I thought about it, talked to my family. You think I could get a little more here or there? That's whining, begging, pleading. That's not very professional. So you're going to be very professional in this whole process by being well prepared. So when you're ready to say yes, you understand all the dotted I's and crossed T's and how they impact you. Even though the numbers maybe didn't get there, if you're going to join the company, be excited about it. I mean, it's an exciting decision. Get everything in writing. If they don't, you write it back to them. And if you change your mind, folks, yes, you will get some black marks. You have to decide how serious they might impact you in your job market as you move forward or in your future career. You just have to decide that yourself. Now, closing out the deal here, want to get it in writing. If you write the letter, as I just said, I would suggest not stopping your search till you've been on this new job for 2 or 3 weeks. Make sure these nice people over here that you interviewed with are still nice people and don't end up in the two-headed ogres. Make sure the job is exactly what you expected for it. Make sure the company's still there on a Monday. Make sure of all these things, and then reach out and spread the word to people in your job market that you've landed a new position. Send them all a nice little email or letter that says, hey, I landed a position a couple weeks ago at XYZ. I've already started working on some projects. I want to thank you for all your support and guidance during this time period. If I can ever help you, please let me know. Okay, that's how you close out. And keep in contact 3 or 4 times a year with all your networking people that you've developed these networking contacts with. These are professional people that you can stay in touch with forever. Okay? Now, and let's see, a question here. Does the fact that I'm currently unemployed and have been for several months here undermine my ability to negotiate? Absolutely no. Okay? You are still that same professional today that you were several months ago. You're marketing your value, not what it's going to cost. You're marketing that value and what you have done. Show them kind of impact you had in your previous position, and also talk about how you'll be able to do similar things for there. So that really doesn't negate your negotiating power here in any way. At least that's my opinion on it. Somebody might try to take advantage of you, but as long as you have done your good job of being prepared, put together your list of items and so on, you're going to be in good shape for the negotiating process here. Okay? Changing careers, it takes a little longer to change careers. Okay? Just make sure you've done your homework on what these new careers pay. And remember, when you're starting a new career, instead of being at the mid or above the midpoint of the range, they'll probably put you at the bottom of the range. That's what the bottom of the range is for. It's for new people in new roles. Okay? Hopefully that answers your question. If not, we can deal with it a little bit later in more detail. If you decline the position, number 1, right down at the bottom, don't use it as a negotiating tactic. That is so dangerous. Don't do that, because more likely than not, they're going to say, well, good luck to you. Bye-bye, close the door on the way out. That's going to happen 99% of the time, so you don't want to do this as a tactic. It's way too dangerous. But do this. Promise me you'll do this. Write it down and send me a note saying you'll do this. I'm just kidding. But pick up the phone and call the HR person and the hiring manager that you've been dealing with. Talk to them. This is not a complex phone call. All you are doing are conveying your decision. You can do it in less than a minute. For example, hi, this is Dick Moore. Just want to let you know I've decided to decline the position. I want to thank you for all your time and consideration. Your company, your department is doing some exciting things. It just didn't appear to be a good fit for where I wanted to take my career at this point. So I wish you lots of success in filling the position. If I can ever help you in any way, please let me know. It took me less than 15 seconds to make that up. Okay? So you can do that, and it's important that you do that. These people have made a lot of time commitments to making you their candidate of choice. You need to be polite and professional and talk to them about it. Then you write a little note that says basically the same thing. And if you're turning me down because of compensation, let me know. I've decided to decline the position. As we discussed in our last negotiation, the compensation level just really didn't reach the level that I thought was appropriate for me at this time in my career. And I want to thank you for all your consideration. The reason you talk and let them know it's based on compensation is if everybody starts turning them down because of comp, eventually, hopefully, they'll wake up and see that they've got to improve it. Now, there's always the odds that, you turn down a position, they might come back and offer you something different. But don't plan on that. You've made a hardcore decision that says, under these conditions, under the terms we negotiated, it's not right for me. And I'm just going to call them up and politely tell them that. Okay? All right, Vladimir, let's come back to your question about signing bonus. If a company doesn't give a signing bonus to anybody, what can I ask for? Well, first of all, be polite and ask if they can close the gap by a signing bonus. If they say that's not part of their policy, There's not much more if you've gone through the stages first of getting that 6-month review. That's important. You do that first before the signing bonus, and then you're put back into that hard rock place of saying, okay, this is as far as they're going compensation, and then you're going to go home and think about this for a day or two more and decide whether this is going to be an offer that's going to be appropriate for you. Okay? I mean, there are stock options, incentive plans, bonus plans that maybe they have. Maybe they could increase the size of the bonus potential for you or guarantee a bonus for the first year or something like that. There's some other options you might look at as well along that line, but not an awful lot as they sort of draw their line in the sand. So let's see what we've learned today, okay? Let's play this out. So what's a good job you're looking for on a Wednesday? Let's say a project manager, and let's say you've done your homework in here, and I'll get back to a couple questions on this in a second here. Well, let's say questions just come in. If we get the job in the remaining part of 2017, are we eligible for bonus, which most companies give out quarter one? Well, that's a great point to ask here, Mandar. What I would do in that situation, let's say you join a company next week or so. We've got, only 2 months left, and their bonus program ends up. You might ask if you can get, 2/12 of a bonus for that first year, for that time. Since you were not part of the plan and hadn't set goals or anything, would you gain a bonus portion for those next 2 months? Or maybe you want to take a slightly different approach and say, since I'm not involved and haven't been involved in setting goals and working with the bonus system before, can you guarantee all or part of my bonus for the first year I'm there? That might be enough to make up for that difference that you're not going to get for the next couple months here. So there's some options in that area that you can look at as well, Mandar. All right, let's get back to our role play. Hope that helps a little bit. And I'll stay on the call for a few questions afterwards as well. But let's say you're looking for a project manager. You've done your salary homework. And let's say it looks like something high 70s, low 80s. So let's say $80,000 appears to be the right price tag for somebody with your background. So you walk into my office. I greet you with open arms and say, I'm really excited to have you in here today. We're looking forward to you joining our company and my department as a project manager. Everybody who's met you is really quite impressed with your background and the way you've had many successes in working on different projects. In fact, I have this project that's coming up right at the end of October here, just before the end, that you've had a lot of experience in based on some of the stories you've been telling about some of your successes. And I'd like to put you in charge of that project. And the other department heads like the way you would bring in people from their departments onto your team. And our team likes the fact that you would be one of our new team members because you're bringing some expertise that we've never had before. So all in all, it looks like a really great fit for both of us. And I would like to offer you the position as project manager, and the starting salary would be $72,000. Okay, so I just gave you this great build-up, and you were looking for 80. I offered you 72. What are you going to do and say? Somebody come in, let's negotiate a little bit. Open mic time. #6 will open your line. Well, what's the first thing you would say, folks? Let's get started that way. We'll get it off to an easy start here. What's the first thing you'd say? Everybody disappears when I do this.
Thank them for the offer. Tell them
okay, so we're going to say thank you. Okay. Yeah. All right, and what else? I'm sorry, I talked over you a little bit. What else would you say after that?
Appreciate how much time that they chose, me instead of so many other people.
Okay, so we get that candidate of choice concept in here. Okay, now what are you going to say? We're off to a good start. Where do you want to go from here? Okay, somebody else want to come in and help us out? Pardon me?
Ask for 2 days' time to think.
Okay, so tell you what, this is Wednesday. Why don't you call me Friday afternoon? Now it's Friday afternoon. And I say, well, you ready to start Monday? Now what are you going to say? And anybody can jump in as well with thoughts and ideas.
Well, based on my research and what I was making before in the similar role, could we negotiate a little bit on the number?
Yeah, we probably can. What would you be looking for?
Again, based on my research, I think 80,000 would be appropriate for this position, considering what I bring to the table and my skill set and how I'm a perfect match for this position.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you are a great match for this. I know you said you're looking for 80. I can't go that high. I can go to 76. How would that do?
We are moving in right direction. Perhaps there's something else we can talk.
Such as?
How about earlier revision of salary instead of waiting for the whole 1 year?
Okay, 6 month review plus 12 months. Should be plus in there. Sorry, had a little typo there. Okay, so I say, yeah, we can do that. You ready to start?
Could we also talk about paid time off?
Okay, now we're getting into vacation, things like that. Okay, great. All right, so good job on that. Let's thank you very much. I don't know who you were, but thank you very much for that play out on that, because you've got a lot of good concepts out here. Anybody else have some other thoughts and ideas that you would do, either similar or different than what was just done? Anybody else? Okay, well, let me run by something here. Let's go over here to the right here on our slide. First thing, you want to do what everybody did, but not for the reasons you did today, okay? You want to be silent for that 5 to 10 seconds. You want to think about what you're going to say, but that silence is also power. If I make you this offer, I just gave you this great build-up about how everybody loves you and your skills and abilities, and you're going to be a great fit for this project. I even remind you that you were successful in similar projects, and then you're sitting there silent. What's the message you're telling me by being silent? Anybody, just throw it out right now. What's the Don't be silent now, folks. What's the message of silence?
I say that I'm thinking that what you've had to say is worth serious consideration, and I'm thinking it over, and I'm not going to blurt anything out because I've come in prepared, and I know what's important to me, so I'm weighing what you have had to say with what I know is important in my mind.
And why are you weighing this out? Because it's not where you really were looking for, right?
Yes. It's not quite there yet.
Not quite there. Well, the power of silence doesn't always work this way, but more often than you think. Because the only thing I can think of, I make you this great build-up, and then I give you this offer, and you just said they're silent. Now, you don't want to look snooty like this lady here looking up in the air, but you can look off to the side, look out the window, write down a note or something like that. But, 5 or 10 seconds of silence. That is, from a person making the offer, that's deadly silence. And, the power of that, let me share a couple examples how that can work. It's not always going to work like this. But I had a candidate, she took this exact program on a Friday morning, and that afternoon she got a job offer she wasn't even expecting to get that day. And she sent me an email over Saturday and said she very nervously tried being silent. And she said, before I said anything, they came back and said, I guess we came in too low. Would this work better for you? And they offered about $3,000 more and brought it up to the number that she was looking for. I had another candidate that the HR person called him up and made him an offer, and he was silent. She said, well, I guess we must have come in a little low. And he said, yes, and then was silent again. She said, don't go away. I told him it was too low. I'll call you back within an hour, and I'll get you another $5,000. And she did. So it's not always going to work instantaneously like that, but it's setting that message that you're not happy. Because if you were to be happy, you'd be jumping up and down, jumping across the desk, giving me hugs and shaking my hand and offering to wash my car windows for the rest of my life kind of thing. But you're not. You're just sitting there, pensively observing the silence. You can put your hand on your chin, think about it a little bit, make a little note. Just don't write down cheapskate, because people can read notes upside down. But be that silence. And then when you break the silence, we're going to do what our gentleman did to begin with. Thank you very much for the job offer. I'm really excited that out of all the candidates, you were the one I felt was the best fit for this job. Now, after you've done that, then we need to talk about two things, neither of which is money. One is the job. Okay, let me get that up here. So one is the job, and the other is the most important thing in the world, and that's you. We're going to talk about you and the job in relationship to each other. In other words, we're going to remind them that you are this solution provider. Okay, that they've got problems and issues, pain points, they're hurting, they need people to run. We got a project coming up before the end of October. That's only a couple weeks out. You've done work in that, so you're going to remind me of that project that you worked on similar to that. Remind me that, I know you're very anxious to get somebody in charge of that project, and I'm excited you think that I'll be able to do the right one here. Okay, and again, negotiations can be done by phone as well here. There's a question coming in. You can still do this by phone. That person that got the money from the HR person, that was by phone. The lady that got the offer, that was by phone as well. Okay, so the same process works whether you're face-to-face or on the phone, but at least we're talking to people. So talk about the job, talk about you. This is maybe 10 to 15-minute discussion. If you haven't asked questions like, when I'm in the job, what are the first 2 or 3 projects I'd be working on? Which one's the most important? Should have been asking those during the interview, but if you haven't, ask them now so you're quite aware of what are their expectations. So be clear on what it is they're looking for you to do so you can go back home and say, is this going to be right fit for me or not? Now, we have to take this conversation someplace. It's only going to be maybe 10 or 15 minutes in conversation. So then you're going to say, well, based on what you're looking for, what I bring to the table, and what's in the marketplace, the offer seems a little modest. Okay? Or maybe conservative is another word. Okay? Modest, the offer, based on what you're looking for, based on what I bring to the table, the offer seems a little conservative or a little modest. Okay? So let's get that up here. Okay, so you're making your point that it's on the low side. Now, we have to take this someplace else at this point. So what I would suggest, a lot of people here say, I'd like some time to think about it, as our gentleman did. Okay, but if you just ask me, I'd like some time to think about it, I'm going to go home and play and have fun. You're going to go home and not sleep and sweat bullets, right? So what are we going to do? The offer seems a little modest, conservative. Let's both think about this. Let's both think about this. I think it's modest what I see in the marketplace, what you're asking me to do, and what I bring to the table. Let's both think about this for a couple of days. Let's get back together on Friday or whenever. Okay, then I'm going to say, well, you're ready to start, and you can't play the silent game anymore. You only get one shot at that. But just in brief summary, just say, well, when we were talking on Wednesday, really excited about the position, think I'm going to be a great asset in it for these reasons. But I mentioned that I thought it was a little modest and conservative. What flexibility, Mr. Company, have you come up with? Because what have you done by saying, let's both think about this? What are you doing? You're saying, hey, cheapskate, you got to go back to the vault and come up with some more cash for me. But you've done this politely and professionally. And then you're coming back and what do you think? Well, you just quickly say, well, based on what I bring, what you're looking for, as I said, I thought the offer was a little modest. What flexibility have you come up with? Now we're finally getting into the numbers. Okay, so at this point, maybe I'd come back and say, well, I could go to 76. And as our gentleman very nicely did, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that's going in the right direction based on that script we saw earlier. But would you then say, would you have any flexibility to get a little bit closer to 80,000, which seems to be more appropriate based on what I've seen in the job market for somebody doing this work with my kind of background? And maybe I do and maybe I don't. But let's say I don't, and then I'm stuck at 76. Well, first of all, ask me why are we sort of stuck here. Could you explain why? I say I just can't go above 76. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. Could you explain why? Well, it's the midpoint of the range, can't hire above that, or I've got an equity issue with other people in the department. Well, thanks for sharing that with me, but we're so close. What about a 6-month review? And we're going to do the 6-month one next. Okay, so let me just put that over here on this side. We had that earlier. And then the other is a sign-on bonus. So a 6-month review, do some quick math. You're still a couple grand short. So what about a sign-on bonus for $2,000 or $3,000? And then we'll get into vacation and the other issues after that. Let's get the base salary settled here. Now, I've had candidates I mentioned before that have gotten all three of these. Got movement in the base salary, got the 6-month review, and the sign-on bonus, even when the initial offer was a little higher than what they were expecting. Because remember, as I said, majority of the companies, and maybe it's a small majority, but they're willing to negotiate for that right candidate. You're that right candidate. Okay? And you're doing this in a nice, polite way. You can say, well, okay, I understand that. Could you explain why? Let them explain it to you and say, look, what I'd like to do, I'd like to think about this for another day or two. Can I get back to you on Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever, to have any other questions answered and give you my answer at that point? That gives you time to think about this. Okay? Yeah, somebody, Julie's asking an interesting question. Did they ever ask you where you've done your research? They say, well, I've done a lot of research. I've looked at salary surveys. I've talked to competitive companies. I've looked at different kind of surveys in here, looked at different level positions, and this is the number, the range of numbers that appears to be close. Something high 70s, low 80s kind of thing. Now, folks, a couple of things. Number one, I'm going to stay on the line if you have other questions, but I know we got time that we need to wrap up here. We're a couple minutes over here. Folks, do this. Research your market. Know your value out there. Create your list of negotiable items. I gave you a nice chart. Prioritize them. Okay, and then prepare how you're going to respond to that salary question. Play salary question with other people, and also play negotiations with people as well. Review how to close a deal. Try it out. Play the game a little bit with this so you get comfortable with it. Because right now it seems, okay, but I'll never remember all these things. Well, when you're playing negotiations at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, you can have your cheat list of notes here, and you can also have some points on your pad of paper when you go in for your interviews. In the column on the left, you can have negotiating steps just to remind yourself of these things in order. 6-month review first, then sign-on bonus, and so on. Now, a couple things. These are other webinars, Interview Practice, Interview Essential Research Tools, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you want to copy out the slides with all the notes on it, all you have to do is follow the bouncing arrow at the